Sarah Mitchell adjusted her thick-rimmed glasses as she walked through the crowded refugee camp in northern Syria. The dusty ground crunched beneath her worn boots, and the smell of cooking fires mixed with diesel fuel filled the air. As a child psychologist working with the International Relief Organization, she had seen many difficult situations, but nothing had prepared her for what she was about to discover. The camp housed nearly 3,000 displaced families, most of them fleeing the ongoing conflict that had torn their country apart. Children ran between the white tents, their laughter a stark contrast to the worried faces of their parents. Sarah carried a small backpack filled with art supplies, crayons, and paper. Art therapy had proven to be one of the most effective ways to help traumatized children express their feelings when words failed them. She stopped at tent number 247, where 8-year-old Amira lived with her grandmother. The little girl had not spoken a single word since arriving at the camp 3 weeks ago. Her grandmother, Fatima, greeted Sarah with tired eyes but a grateful smile. "She still will not talk," Fatima said in broken English, gesturing toward Amira, who sat cross-legged on a thin mattress staring at nothing. "But she draws. Always drawing." Sarah knelt down beside Amira and gently placed the art supplies between them. The child's dark eyes flickered with interest as she reached for a red crayon. Without hesitation, she began to draw on a fresh piece of paper. Sarah watched carefully, noting how Amira's small hand moved with unusual precision for someone her age. The drawing that emerged was unlike anything Sarah had seen from a child before. While most children drew stick figures and simple houses, Amira created detailed architectural structures with precise lines and measurements. The building she drew had multiple levels, underground sections, and what appeared to be ventilation systems. Most disturbing were the small figures she drew inside the building, all lying down as if asleep or worse. "What is this place, Amira?" Sarah asked softly, but the girl remained silent, adding more details to her drawing. Over the next hour, Amira completed 3 more drawings, each showing different views of the same complex structure. One drawing showed the building from above, revealing a layout that looked more like a facility than a home. Another showed underground tunnels connecting to other buildings. The third drawing was the most unsettling. It showed men in white coats standing over the lying figures, holding what looked like medical instruments. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. These were not typical child drawings of houses or families. They showed technical knowledge and attention to detail that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old. The way Amira drew the ventilation systems, the precise measurements, and the complex underground network suggested she had either seen these places or had been taught to draw them. When the session ended, Sarah carefully collected all 4 drawings and said goodbye to Amira and her grandmother. As she walked back to her quarters, she could not shake the feeling that these drawings meant something important. The level of detail was extraordinary, and the subject matter was deeply concerning. That evening, Sarah sat in her small tent, studying the drawings under the light of a battery-powered lamp. She pulled out her laptop and began researching architectural patterns and facility designs that matched what Amira had drawn. The more she looked, the more convinced she became that these were not products of a child's imagination. The buildings in the drawings had features consistent with laboratory facilities or research centers. The underground tunnels and ventilation systems were too sophisticated for a child to invent. The positioning of the figures and the presence of people in white coats suggested medical or scientific activities. Sarah decided to reach out to her supervisor, Dr. James Harrison, who was stationed at the organization's headquarters in Geneva. She scanned the drawings and sent them via encrypted email, along with a detailed report about Amira's background and behavior. The response came faster than expected. Dr. Harrison called her within 2 hours, his voice tense and urgent. "Sarah, I need you to keep those drawings secure and not show them to anyone else," he said. "I'm forwarding them to some colleagues who specialize in intelligence analysis. There might be more to this than we initially thought." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. These drawings show details that a child should not know. The architectural features, the layout, the technical elements. They suggest that Amira may have witnessed something significant before she arrived at the camp. Sarah felt her heart racing. "You think she was at one of these facilities?" "It's possible. We need to be very careful about how we handle this. If these drawings depict real locations and if Amira was there, she might be in danger. People who operate such facilities do not like witnesses." The call ended with Dr. Harrison promising to contact her again within 24 hours. Sarah looked at the drawings spread across her small desk, realizing that what she had initially thought was a breakthrough in art therapy might actually be evidence of something much darker. She thought about Amira's silence, her grandmother's worry, and the way the little girl had drawn with such focus and precision. These were not random pictures created by a traumatized child working through her emotions. They were detailed records of places Amira had seen, places where terrible things had happened. Sarah carefully placed the drawings in a waterproof folder and locked them in her security case. She would not sleep well that night, knowing that a small child carried such heavy secrets in her mind. Tomorrow she would have to decide how far she was willing to go to uncover the truth behind Amira's drawings. As she lay on her narrow cot, listening to the sounds of the camp settling down for the night, Sarah wondered what kind of world created situations where children witnessed things so terrible they stopped speaking altogether. The drawings were just the beginning, and she had a feeling that the truth they revealed would be more shocking than anything she could imagine. Outside her tent, the wind carried the distant sound of helicopters, a reminder that even in this refugee camp, they were not completely safe from the conflict that had displaced so many families. Sarah pulled her blanket tighter and tried to sleep, but Amira's precise, haunting drawings remained vivid in her mind. Dr. Harrison's promised call came at exactly 6 a.m., waking Sarah from restless sleep. The early morning air in the refugee camp was cold, and she wrapped a blanket around her shoulders as she answered her encrypted phone. "Sarah, we need to talk immediately." Dr. Harrison's voice was strained. "The drawings you sent have caused quite a stir. I've been on calls all night with people from various agencies." "What kind of agencies?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to understand that this situation was far beyond anything the International Relief Organization typically handled. Intelligence agencies. The architectural details in those drawings match satellite imagery of a facility that was destroyed 3 months ago, just before the major offensive in that region. A facility that officially never existed. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. "What kind of facility?" "That's classified. But I can tell you that if Amira was there, she witnessed something that several governments would prefer to keep secret. We need to get her out of that camp, and we need to do it quietly." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Amira was not just a traumatized refugee child. She was a witness to something so significant that powerful people would want to silence her. "Is she in immediate danger?" "Potentially, yes. I'm sending a security specialist named Marcus Webb to your location. He should arrive this afternoon. In the meantime, I need you to spend more time with Amira. See if you can get her to draw more, but be extremely careful about who sees the drawings." After the call ended, Sarah sat in her tent trying to process what she had learned. The child she had been trying to help with art therapy was actually a key witness to some kind of government conspiracy. The responsibility felt overwhelming. She made her way to the camp's communal kitchen for breakfast, trying to appear normal while her mind raced with questions. Other aid workers greeted her with their usual tired but friendly smiles, completely unaware that their camp might be harboring one of the most important witnesses in recent history. At 9 a.m., Sarah returned to Tent 247 with fresh art supplies. Fatima welcomed her as usual, but Sarah noticed the older woman looked more worried than before. "Men came asking questions last night," Fatima said quietly as Sarah set up her materials. "They wanted to know about Amira, about what she remembers from before we came here." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What kind of men?" "They said they were from the camp administration, but they did not look like the other workers. They wore nice clothes and they had expensive watches. They asked if Amira had talked to anyone, if she had drawn pictures." "What did you tell them?" "I told them she does not speak and that she only draws flowers and butterflies," Fatima lied smoothly. "But I am worried. These men, they had cold eyes. They were not here to help refugees." Sarah realized that time was running out. If unknown men were already asking questions about Amira, it meant that word of the drawings had somehow leaked or that these people had been watching the camp all along. She turned to Amira, who was already reaching for the crayons. "Can you draw more about the place you saw before coming here?" Sarah asked gently. Amira nodded and began drawing with the same intense focus as before. This time her drawing showed what appeared to be a laboratory with complex equipment. She drew tables with straps, machines with many wires, and figures in white coats holding clipboards. Most disturbing of all, she drew children lying on the tables, their eyes closed. As Amira continued drawing, Sarah noticed something she had missed before. In the corner of each drawing, Amira included small symbols that looked like letters or numbers. They appeared to be some kind of identification system, perhaps room numbers or facility codes. Amira, these marks in the corner, what do they mean? Sarah asked, pointing to the symbols. For the first time since Sarah had met her, Amira spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, but the words were clear. Building 7, Section C, Room 15. The specificity of the information sent chills through Sarah. These were not vague childhood memories. They were precise details that could only come from someone who had been forced to memorize them. Were you in Building 7? Sarah asked carefully. Amira nodded, then began drawing again. This new picture showed what looked like a dormitory with many small beds. Children lay in the beds, and adults in white coats moved between them with syringes. At the bottom of the drawing, Amira wrote something in Arabic script. Sarah could not read Arabic, but she photographed the writing with her phone to translate later. As she did, she heard voices outside the tent speaking in a language that was not Arabic or English. The voices were getting closer. Fatima, take Amira to the back of the tent and stay quiet, Sarah whispered urgently. 2 men in civilian clothes entered the tent without permission. They were exactly as Fatima had described, well-dressed with expensive accessories that marked them as outsiders in this refugee camp. Ms. Mitchell? The taller man asked in accented English. We are from the Syrian Health Ministry. We understand you have been working with a child who may have been exposed to infectious diseases at her previous location. Sarah forced herself to remain calm. I work with many children. Could you be more specific? The girl named Amira. We need to examine her and her drawings to determine if she requires special medical treatment. I'm sorry, but patient confidentiality prevents me from discussing specific cases with unauthorized personnel. If you're truly from the health ministry, you'll need to provide proper documentation and work through official channels. The second man stepped forward, his hand moving to his jacket pocket. Ms. Mitchell, I think you misunderstand the urgency of this situation. The girl may have been exposed to dangerous biological agents. For the safety of everyone in this camp, we need to examine her immediately. Sarah realized these men were not going to leave without Amira. She needed to buy time until Marcus Webb arrived. Of course, I understand your concern. Let me gather the necessary medical forms and we can proceed properly. Give me just a few minutes to prepare everything. The men exchanged glances but nodded. We will wait outside, the tall man said. But we expect your full cooperation. As soon as they left the tent, Sarah quickly gathered Amira's drawings and her art supplies. She whispered to Fatima in broken Arabic that they needed to leave immediately. The older woman understood the urgency and began gathering their few belongings. Sarah used her phone to send an emergency message to Dr. Harrison. Compromised. Unknown agents at camp demanding access to subject. Need immediate extraction. The response came within seconds. Webb is 30 minutes out. Get to the northern edge of camp. Flew vehicle. Sarah looked at Amira, who seemed to understand that they were in danger. The little girl clutched a crayon in her hand and looked at Sarah with eyes that held far too much knowledge for someone her age. We're going to take a walk, Sarah told her gently. Stay close to me and don't let go of your grandmother's hand. As they prepared to leave the tent, Sarah realized that what had started as a simple art therapy session had become a race against time to protect a child whose drawings could expose secrets that powerful people were willing to kill to keep hidden. Sarah led Fatima and Amira through the maze of tents, trying to look casual while moving as quickly as possible toward the northern edge of the camp. Her heart pounded as she heard the 2 men calling her name behind them, their voices growing more urgent and aggressive. The refugee camp was a sprawling collection of white tents and temporary structures that housed thousands of displaced families. Sarah knew the layout well after weeks of working there, but navigating through it while being pursued was a different challenge entirely. They moved between clusters of tents using clotheslines and cooking areas as cover. Amira stayed close to her grandmother, clutching the crayon she had been holding when they left the tent. Despite the danger, the little girl seemed remarkably calm, as if she had been in similar situations before. This observation troubled Sarah deeply. What kind of life had this child lived that being chased by dangerous men felt familiar? They reached a small marketplace area where refugees sold handmade items and shared resources. Sarah used the crowd as cover, weaving between vendors and shoppers while keeping an eye out for the blue vehicle Marcus Webb was supposed to be driving. "There," Fatima whispered, pointing toward the edge of the camp where a blue SUV was parked near the perimeter fence. As they moved toward the vehicle, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. "Webb here. 3 minutes out from your location. White shirt, black jacket." Sarah scanned the area and spotted a man matching the description walking toward them. He appeared to be in his 40s with the alert posture of someone trained in security work. As he approached, he made eye contact with Sarah and gave a subtle nod. "Dr. Mitchell, Marcus Webb. We need to move now," he said quietly. "I have intelligence that more agents are converging on this location." "How many more?" Sarah asked as they walked quickly toward the SUV. "At least 6, possibly more. This operation is bigger than we initially thought. Someone really wants this little girl silenced." They reached the vehicle and Marcus quickly helped Fatima and Amira into the back seat. Sarah climbed into the front passenger seat, clutching her bag containing Amira's drawings. As Marcus started the engine, Sarah saw the 2 men from the tent running toward them across the camp. One of them was speaking rapidly into a radio, while the other pulled something from his jacket that glinted in the sunlight. "Gun," Sarah said tersely. Marcus floored the accelerator, and the SUV lurched forward, kicking up dust as they drove toward the camp's main exit. In the rearview mirror, Sarah could see more men emerging from different areas of the camp, all moving toward their last known location. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked as they cleared the camp's perimeter and turned onto a dirt road leading away from the area. "Safe house about 40 miles from here. It's operated by an international intelligence cooperative that works to protect witnesses and whistleblowers. Once we're there, we can properly debrief Amira and analyze her drawings." The drive through the Syrian countryside was tense. Marcus frequently checked his mirrors and took several unexpected turns to ensure they were not being followed. Sarah used the time to translate the Arabic writing from Amira's latest drawing, using a translation app on her phone. The words made her stomach turn. "Special project, children, building 7. Doctor says we help our country." Sarah turned to look at Amira, who was sitting quietly between her grandmother and the car door. "Amira, can you tell me about the doctor you drew? The one who said you were helping your country." Amira spoke in her whispered voice. "Dr. Hassan. He said we were special children. He said we would make Syria strong again. But the other children got sick. They stopped moving." Fatima stroked her granddaughter's hair gently. "She has nightmares every night. She sees the other children who did not wake up." Marcus glanced at Sarah with a grim expression. "Biological weapons program," he said quietly. "That's what the intelligence agency suspected. A state-sponsored research program using children as test subjects." The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and the picture they revealed was horrifying. Amira had been part of some kind of government experiment, probably involving chemical or biological weapons testing. The facility in her drawings was likely where the Syrian government had been conducting illegal human experimentation. "How many other children were there?" Sarah asked Amira gently. "Many, boys and girls. Different ages. They brought new ones every week. I was there for..." Amira paused, counting on her fingers. 7 weeks, maybe 8. "And you were there when the building was destroyed?" Amira nodded. "Big explosion. Fire everywhere. Grandmother found me in the rubble. She pulled me out." Sarah realized that Fatima was not just Amira's grandmother. She was her rescuer. "How did you know where to find her?" she asked the older woman. Fatima's eyes filled with tears. "I worked in the kitchen at the facility. I prepared food for the children, but I was not allowed to speak to them. When the bombs came, I remembered where they kept the children. I could not save them all, but I saved my granddaughter." The full scope of the tragedy became clear. Fatima had been forced to work at a facility where her own granddaughter was being used as a test subject. She had been feeding children who were being slowly poisoned or infected as part of some twisted research program. "That's why the drawings are so detailed," Marcus said. "Amira didn't just see the facility once. She lived there for weeks. She memorized every detail because her survival depended on knowing the layout." They drove for another hour before reaching the safe house, a modest building surrounded by high walls and security cameras. Marcus used a special code to open the gates, and they drove into a courtyard where armed guards were waiting. This is a joint facility operated by multiple intelligence agencies, Marcus explained as they got out of the vehicle. Everyone here has been cleared to work with sensitive witnesses. Amira and her grandmother will be safe here while we figure out the next steps. As they walked toward the building, Sarah realized that her simple art therapy session had uncovered evidence of war crimes. Amira's drawings were not just the products of a traumatized child's imagination. They were detailed documentation of a government program that violated every international law regarding human experimentation. Inside the safe house, they were greeted by Dr. Elena Kozlov, a Russian intelligence analyst who specialized in biological weapons programs. She examined Amira's drawings with the intensity of someone who understood their significance. These drawings show Level 4 biosafety protocols, Dr. Kozlov said after studying them for several minutes. The ventilation systems, the isolation procedures, the protective equipment worn by the staff. This was a sophisticated biological weapons research facility. What exactly were they doing to the children? Sarah asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. Dr. Kozlov looked at Amira, who was sitting quietly with her grandmother, and chose her words carefully. Based on these drawings and the symptoms described, it appears they were testing aerosolized biological agents. The children were exposed to various pathogens to measure infectivity rates, symptom progression, and lethality. Sarah felt sick. These were not just war crimes. They were crimes against humanity on a scale that was almost impossible to comprehend. And somehow 8-year-old Amira had survived when so many other children had not. The question now, Dr. Kozlov continued, is what we do with this information. These drawings are evidence of systematic atrocities, but using them as evidence could put Amira in even greater danger. As if she could sense that the adults were discussing her fate. Amira looked up from the coloring book she had been given and spoke in her quiet voice. I want to help the other children, the ones who could not run away. 3 days later, the safe house had transformed into a high-security intelligence operation. Analysts from multiple countries arrived with encrypted laptops and satellite communication equipment. Sarah watched as Amira's simple drawings became the center of an international investigation. Dr. Kozlov had set up a specialized interview room where Amira could feel comfortable while sharing her memories. The room was painted in soft colors and filled with toys, but sophisticated recording equipment captured every word the little girl spoke. General Robert Hayes, a senior official from the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, arrived on the second day. Sarah had initially been told she would need to leave once the military personnel took over, but Amira refused to speak to anyone except Sarah. This gave Sarah an unprecedented view into how intelligence agencies handled cases involving war crimes. Ms. Mitchell, General Hayes said during a private briefing, what we're dealing with here goes far beyond a single illegal research facility. Amira's testimony, combined with her drawings, provides evidence of a systematic program that may have involved multiple sites and hundreds of victims. Sarah looked through the one-way glass at Amira, who was drawing another picture while snacking on cookies. The little girl seemed remarkably resilient, but Sarah knew the trauma ran deep. What happens to her after this investigation is complete? That depends on several factors. Her testimony could be crucial for international war crimes tribunals, but testifying would put her in extreme danger. On the other hand, if we don't act on this information, more children could suffer the same fate. Dr. Kozlov joined their conversation, carrying a tablet with satellite images. We've identified the locations of 3 other facilities based on Amira's descriptions. 2 were destroyed in recent airstrikes, but 1 appears to still be operational. The images showed a compound hidden in a mountainous region, surrounded by what appeared to be a research complex. Sarah could see the architectural features that matched Amira's drawings, the underground tunnels, the specialized ventilation systems, and the isolation buildings. Are there children in that facility right now? Sarah asked. Our intelligence suggests yes. Thermal imaging shows multiple small heat signatures in the residential areas of the compound. If Amira's testimony is accurate, those children are in immediate danger. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Amira's drawings had not only exposed past atrocities, but had also revealed ongoing crimes that could be stopped if action was taken quickly. That afternoon, Sarah sat with Amira in the comfortable interview room. The little girl had drawn 17 detailed pictures over the past 3 days. each one revealing new aspects of the facility where she had been held. Amira, the people here want to help other children who might be in places like where you were, but they need to understand more about what happened to you. Amira looked up from her drawing, her dark eyes serious beyond her years. Will telling them help the other children come home? It might, but it's also dangerous. There are bad people who don't want anyone to know about those places. I know about the bad people, Amira said matter-of-factly. They told us we could never leave. They said our families would be hurt if we talked. But grandmother saved me, so now I can talk. Sarah marveled at the child's courage. Despite everything she had experienced, Amira was willing to relive her trauma if it meant helping others. Can you tell me about the other children? Do you remember their names? Amira nodded and began writing on a fresh piece of paper. Her handwriting was careful and precise as she listed names in both Arabic and English. Samir, age 6, Layla, age 9, Omar, age 7, Nadia, age 8. The list continued until she had written 23 names. Next to each name, she wrote a few words describing what had happened to them. Got sick and stopped talking. Started shaking and couldn't stop. Went to sleep and didn't wake up. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she read the list. Each name represented a child who had suffered unimaginable horrors. Amira, you are very brave for remembering them. Dr. Hassan said forgetting would make the pain go away. But I don't want to forget. If I forget, then nobody will remember that they were real children with real names. Later that evening, Sarah joined the intelligence team for a strategy meeting. General Hayes had received authorization to conduct a rescue operation at the active facility. But the window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Satellite intelligence shows increased activity at the site. Dr. Kozlov reported, they appear to be preparing to evacuate. If we're going to act, it has to be within the next 48 hours. Marcus Webb, who had been coordinating security for the safe house, raised a concern. What about retaliation against Amira? If we conduct a raid based on her information, it won't take long for them to figure out where the intelligence came from. General Hayes nodded grimly. That's a risk we'll have to manage. We're prepared to relocate Amira and her grandmother to a secure location outside the region, with new identities if necessary. Sarah realized that helping these children would mean Amira and Fatima could never return to their homeland. They would become permanent refugees, forever looking over their shoulders for those who wanted to silence them. There's something else, Dr. Kozlov said, pulling up another set of documents on her tablet. We've identified Dr. Hassan, the man Amira mentioned. He's not just a researcher, he's the program director. Intelligence suggests he's been running similar operations in 3 different countries over the past decade. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. This was not an isolated incident, but part of an international network of illegal human experimentation. Dr. Hassan was apparently a specialist who moved from country to country, setting up biological weapons programs that used children as test subjects. If we can capture Dr. Hassan, his testimony could expose the entire network, General Hayes said. But he's also the person most likely to order retaliation against Amira. Sarah looked around the room at the serious faces of intelligence professionals trying to balance justice against the safety of a little girl. What does Amira want? Has anyone asked her? The question seemed to surprise the military and intelligence personnel. They were accustomed to making strategic decisions based on national security concerns, not the preferences of 8-year-old witnesses. Maybe we should ask her, Sarah suggested. She's the one who survived this horror. She should have a voice in what happens next. Dr. Kozlov agreed to arrange for Amira to be briefed about the potential rescue operation in age-appropriate terms. The next morning, Sarah sat with Amira and Fatima to explain the situation. The people here want to help the children who are still in places like where you were, Sarah began carefully. But helping them might make some dangerous people angry. It might mean you and your grandmother would have to go live somewhere far away, where you would be safe but where you could never come home to Syria. Amira listened carefully, then looked at her grandmother. Fatima spoke to her in Arabic for several minutes, and Sarah could see the love and concern in the older woman's eyes. Finally, Amira turned back to Sarah. Grandmother says the choice is mine. She says I am old enough to understand what it means. The little girl was quiet for a long moment, looking at the pictures she had drawn over the past few days. Each drawing represented a memory that most adults could not bear to think about, yet this child had survived it and was now being asked to relive it to save others. "I want to help them," Amira said finally. "The other children. I want them to go home to their families, even if it means we can't go home to ours." The rescue operation began at dawn on a Tuesday morning. Sarah watched from the Safe House Command Center as satellite feeds showed military helicopters approaching the hidden facility in the mountains. General Hayes had assembled a joint task force involving special operations teams from 3 different countries, all working together to raid the active biological weapons site. Amira sat beside Sarah, holding her grandmother's hand as they watched the screens. The little girl had insisted on being present during the operation, saying she wanted to see the moment when the other children were freed. Dr. Kozlov had initially objected, but General Hayes had allowed it, understanding that Amira needed to witness justice being done. The first helicopter touched down outside the main compound at 6:15 a.m. local time. Sarah could see soldiers in protective gear rushing toward the buildings that Amira had drawn so precisely. The architectural details from the child's drawings had allowed the military planners to prepare detailed assault maps, knowing exactly where to find the children and how to navigate the facility's complex layout. "Building 7, Amira whispered, pointing at one of the screens. "That's where they keep the children who are still alive." The soldiers moved efficiently through the compound, their cameras transmitting live footage back to the command center. Sarah felt her heart racing as they entered the building Amira had indicated. The hallways looked exactly as the little girl had drawn them. Long corridors with numbered doors, fluorescent lighting, and that distinctive ventilation system. When the soldiers reached Section C, they found what they were looking for. Behind locked doors were 26 children, ranging in age from 5 to 12. Most were severely malnourished and showing signs of chemical or biological exposure, but they were alive. Sarah watched as medics rushed into the rooms to begin treating the children. Many were too weak to walk and had to be carried on stretchers. Others cowered in corners, terrified by the noise and confusion of the rescue operation. "Room 15, Amira said quietly, watching intently as the soldiers moved through the facility. "That's where they keep the newest children." The camera followed a team of soldiers to room 15, where they found 8 children who appeared to have been recently brought to the facility. Unlike the others, these children were relatively healthy, suggesting they had not yet been subjected to the full experimental protocol. As the rescue continued, other teams searched for Dr. Hassan and his research staff. They found the laboratory areas that Amira had drawn, complete with the restraining tables and mysterious equipment. Computer servers containing research data were seized, along with detailed records of the experiments that had been conducted. Dr. Hassan was discovered in his office, attempting to destroy files when the soldiers broke down his door. Sarah watched as he was arrested and led away in restraints, knowing that this man had been responsible for the suffering of hundreds of children over many years. The entire operation took less than 4 hours. By 10:30 a.m., all 34 children had been evacuated to a military hospital in a neighboring country, where specialized medical teams were waiting to treat them. The facility was secured and teams of investigators were documenting evidence of the atrocities that had taken place there. Amira watched it all with quiet intensity, occasionally pointing out details or explaining what certain rooms had been used for. When the last child was loaded onto a medical helicopter, she finally spoke. "They're safe now," she said simply. "They can go home to their families." Dr. Kozlov approached with updates from the field teams. The medical personnel report that while many of the children will require extensive treatment, they expect all of them to survive. The children who were rescued appear to have been exposed to various biological agents, but none that will cause permanent damage. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. Amira's courage in sharing her story had directly led to saving 34 lives. But she also knew that the psychological trauma these children had experienced would require years of healing. General Hayes joined them with additional news. "Dr. Hassan is talking. He's providing information about the entire network of facilities and the people who funded them. This could lead to the exposure of biological weapons programs in multiple countries." Over the next few days, the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. Dr. Hassan had been working for a network of government officials and private contractors who were developing biological weapons for use in regional conflicts. The program had been operating for over a decade, moving from country to country as international pressure mounted. The children who had been used as test subjects came from refugee populations, orphanages, and poor families who had been told their children were being given educational opportunities or medical treatment. Instead, they had been subjected to experimental infections to test the effectiveness and lethality of various biological agents. Sarah spent hours interviewing the rescued children as they recovered in the military hospital. Many of their stories were similar to Amira's. They had been taken from their families under false pretenses, held in the research facility, and subjected to medical procedures that made them sick. One boy named Karim, who was 9 years old, drew pictures that were remarkably similar to Amira's. His drawings showed the same buildings, the same laboratory equipment, and the same terrifying procedures. But his drawings also showed something new, a second facility that was connected to the first by underground tunnels. "There's another place," Karim told Sarah through a translator. "Underground. That's where they take the children who get very sick. Some come back, but most don't." This revelation prompted another investigation. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed the existence of an extensive underground complex beneath the raided facility. When military engineers gained access to these tunnels, they made a horrifying discovery. The underground facility contained a crematorium and mass burial sites. Forensic investigators estimated that over 400 children had died at this location over the past 5 years. Each burial site was carefully documented, and efforts began to identify the victims and notify their families. Sarah found herself working closely with international human rights investigators as they built cases against not only Dr. Hassan, but the entire network of people who had enabled these atrocities. Amira's drawings had become key evidence in what would become one of the largest war crimes prosecutions in recent history. But the victory came with a heavy price. Intelligence reports indicated that several surviving members of the biological weapons network had placed bounties on Amira and her family. The little girl who had survived so much was now being hunted by people who wanted to silence her forever. General Hayes made the difficult decision to relocate Amira and Fatima to a secure location in Canada, where they would be given new identities and placed in a witness protection program. Sarah was offered the opportunity to accompany them as Amira's psychological counselor, recognizing that the child would need ongoing support. On their last night at the safe house, Sarah sat with Amira as the little girl drew one final picture. This drawing was different from all the others. Instead of showing laboratories and suffering, it showed children playing in a sunny playground, surrounded by their families. "Is this what you hope will happen to the children we saved?" Sarah asked. Amira nodded. "They will go home now. They will play with their brothers and sisters. They will forget about the bad place. What about you? Do you think you'll forget about the bad place?" Amira considered this question carefully. "I don't want to forget completely. If I forget, then nobody will remember the children who didn't come home. But I want to remember the good things too. I want to remember that we helped them." The next morning, Sarah, Amira, and Fatima boarded a military transport aircraft that would take them to their new life in Canada. As the plane lifted off, Sarah reflected on how a simple art therapy session had uncovered one of the most significant humanitarian crimes of the modern era. Amira fell asleep during the flight, her head resting against her grandmother's shoulder. In her hand, she clutched a new set of crayons that Sarah had given her. When she woke up in Canada, she would begin drawing again, but this time, her pictures would show hope instead of horror. The investigation that began with a child's drawings would continue for years, ultimately leading to the prosecution of dozens of government officials and the exposure of biological weapons programs in 7 different countries. But for Sarah, the most important outcome was simpler. 34 children had gone home to their families, and one brave little girl had found the courage to help them by sharing the terrible truth she carried in her heart. 2 years later, Sarah stood in a courtroom in The Hague, watching as the International Criminal Court delivered its verdict against Dr. Hassan and his associates. The man who had orchestrated the deaths of hundreds of children was sentenced to life imprisonment for crimes against humanity and war crimes. It was the culmination of the longest and most complex prosecution in the court's history. Amira, now 10 years old, was not present in the courtroom. She was thousands of miles away in a small Canadian town, attending elementary school under her new identity. Sarah had promised her that she would be there to witness justice being served on behalf of all the children who had suffered. The evidence that secured the conviction was overwhelming. Amira's detailed drawings had provided the initial breakthrough, but investigators had ultimately uncovered a massive archive of documentation from the biological weapons program. Dr. Hassan had meticulously recorded his experiments, never imagining that his careful notes would one day be used to convict him. General Hayes, now retired from military service, sat in the gallery beside Sarah. He had testified during the trial about the rescue operation and the intelligence that had made it possible. None of this would have happened without that little girl's courage, he whispered as the judge read the sentence. The trial had revealed the full extent of the horror. Over a period of 8 years, Dr. Hassan's network had operated in 7 different countries, using over 800 children as test subjects for biological weapons research. Most of the children had died from the experimental infections or from the treatments that were supposed to cure them. The surviving children had been scattered across the globe for their own protection. Many were living with new families in witness protection programs, slowly healing from their physical and psychological trauma. Others had been reunited with relatives who had spent years searching for them. Sarah had maintained contact with several of the rescued children through secure communication channels. They sent her drawings and letters, sharing their progress as they recovered from their experiences. Many of them had asked about Amira, the girl whose bravery had led to their rescue. After the verdict was announced, Sarah flew back to Canada to visit Amira and Fatima in their new home. The small house was surrounded by a garden that Fatima tended with loving care, growing vegetables and flowers that reminded her of Syria. Amira had her own room filled with art supplies and drawings that showed her new life, pictures of her school, her friends, and the Canadian family that had welcomed them. Did they find him guilty? Amira asked when Sarah arrived. Despite her young age, she understood the importance of the trial and what it meant for the other children. Yes, he was found guilty of all charges. He will spend the rest of his life in prison because of what he did to you and the other children. Amira nodded solemnly. Good. Now he can't hurt any more children. Sarah spent a week with Amira and her grandmother, marveling at how well they had adapted to their new life. Amira was thriving in school, where her teachers knew her as a bright refugee child who had overcome tremendous challenges. They had no idea that their student was one of the most important witnesses in modern legal history. The little girl still drew constantly, but her pictures had evolved dramatically. Where once she had drawn laboratories and suffering, she now created images of hope and healing. Her latest series of drawings showed the rescued children in their new homes, playing and laughing with their families. I dream about them sometimes, Amira told Sarah as they walked through the garden. The other children from the bad place. But in my dreams, they're all safe now. They're all home. Fatima had also found peace in their new life. She worked part-time at a local community center, helping other refugee families adjust to life in Canada. Her experience caring for Amira had given her unique insight into helping children who had experienced trauma. She is healing, Fatima told Sarah one evening as they watched Amira play with neighborhood children in the backyard. The nightmares are less frequent now. She laughs more. She is becoming a normal child again. During her visit, Sarah also met with Dr. Jennifer Martinez, the psychologist who had been working with Amira since their arrival in Canada. Dr. Martinez had extensive experience treating children who had experienced severe trauma, but she admitted that Amira's case was unlike anything she had encountered. Her resilience is remarkable, Dr. Martinez explained. Most children who survive experiences like hers struggle with trust, emotional regulation, and social connections for years. But Amira seems to have found a way to compartmentalize her trauma while still maintaining her capacity for empathy and connection. Do you think it's because she was able to help the other children? Sarah asked. Partly yes. Being able to transform her suffering into something that helped others gave her a sense of purpose and control. Her drawings weren't just therapeutic for her. They became tools of justice and rescue. That's incredibly empowering for a child who had been completely powerless. As Sarah prepared to leave Canada, Amira presented her with a special drawing. This picture showed Sarah sitting with a group of children, all of them smiling and holding crayons. At the bottom, Amira had written in careful English, "Thank you for listening to my pictures. I have something to tell you," Amira said as Sarah packed her bags. "I want to be a doctor when I grow up, but not like Dr. Hassan. I want to be a doctor who helps children feel better, not one who makes them sick. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. Despite everything this child had endured, she had emerged with a desire to heal rather than hurt. I think you'll be an excellent doctor, Amira. You already know how to help people who are suffering. The flight back to her home base took Sarah over the Atlantic Ocean, giving her time to reflect on the incredible journey that had begun with a simple art therapy session. Amira's drawings had not only exposed one of the most horrific crimes against children in modern history, but had also demonstrated the power of bearing witness to suffering. The biological weapons network had been dismantled, its leaders imprisoned, and its funding sources exposed. International laws had been strengthened to prevent similar programs from operating in the future. Most importantly, dozens of children had been saved and were now living safe, normal lives with their families. But for Sarah, the most profound impact was personal. Working with Amira had taught her that even in the darkest circumstances, children possessed an incredible capacity for resilience, courage, and hope. The little girl who had survived unimaginable horrors had not only saved other children but had also shown the adults around her what true bravery looked like. 6 months after the trial ended, Sarah received a package in the mail from Canada. Inside was a new drawing from Amira, showing a graduation ceremony with a young woman in a doctor's coat receiving her diploma. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, Amira had written, "Dr. Amira, helper of children." Sarah smiled as she hung the drawing on her office wall, next to copies of the original pictures that had started everything. They served as a daily reminder that sometimes the most important truths come from the most unexpected sources, and that courage can emerge from the smallest and most vulnerable among us. Years later, when people asked Sarah about the case that had changed international law and exposed a global conspiracy, she would always redirect the conversation to focus on the children who had survived. Their healing, their resilience, and their hope for the future were the real victories that had emerged from such terrible circumstances. And somewhere in Canada, a young girl continued to draw pictures of a better world, one where all children were safe, loved, and free to dream of becoming doctors who healed rather than harmed.